Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Eljay Johnsen Show. This show airs every single weekend, every Saturday, at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, unless specified otherwise over on Twitter, at the Eljay Johnsen, where you can find updates and guest announcements every single Tuesday. And if you have any questions over the week, make sure you head on over to my email, ljjohnson@gmail.com. Remember, that's JOHNSEN. Okay. Well, that's actually rather seamless. I'm very happy. Okay, so I am quite excited for my next guest. He is one of the main contributors and compilers, I think that'd be the best word, for Biological Chronicle, the complete Bionicle collection. It is, of course, none other than TuragaNuva. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for taking the time. I certainly appreciate it. All right, so we actually have quite a bit to discuss, but first I'm going to, of course, start things off, as I usually do, and that's by asking, how has the weather been for you?
Um, the weather, it's a little hot lately.
That's unacceptable. Yeah, no, I do not know. Well, okay, to be fair, though, what constitutes as hot? Like, what is hot?
It's been getting into the 80s a little bit around here
Ooh, okay,
lately,
yeah.
which is where it gets a little hot for me.
Yep, yep. I agree, yeah. It's, it's getting there. It's on its way to 80s, so... I mean, to be fair, it is getting close to summer. It's right around the corner in about, I want to say June-ish? It's usually June when it starts fully. So,
hmm
fair enough. Okay, well, that being the case, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you got into Lego, to Bionicle, and eventually into the community.
All right. I've been into Lego just about as long as I can remember, really. Kind of started when I was very young with not really sets actually to start out with, but my mom when I was very young got me like a big bin of like just random Lego parts from like a thrift store or something. So I was introduced to it sort of as just like a thing I could make whatever with, and that was very fun.
Hmm.
Bionicle specifically though was where I really started getting into it. I've been a fan of Bionicle since it started pretty much, back in 2001. Uh, I felt a little late to the party because like I got to school one day and like all my friends were talking about like they were saying these weird words I didn't understand, like Toa and stuff. And I was like, what is this thing that I've missed the boat on? Uh, but no, after that, that was when I subscribed to Lego magazine. My first issue of the comic was issue number 3, which I'm still very nostalgic for. I have like the whole thing memorized. I reread it so many times.
Hmm.
um, yeah, been into the sets and the story in a large way since then. I didn't actually really get involved with any of the online Bionicle community until like 2008. Even really aware that there was an online like Bionicle community until then.
Like, you never, like, looked up Bionicle or any set photos online at any point?
Well, I didn't have internet at home until probably 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wasn't really doing it. Like I remember going on the Bionicle website at a library every now and then when I was young. Um, but Yeah, not really. I just kind of like as the sets came out, like I got them, I looked at them in the magazines and stuff. And it was actually at one point I was just looking up, photos of different Bionicle stuff and started seeing photos of sets that like late 2008 I was seeing like Glatorian pictures and I was like, what are these things? I haven't seen these. And that led me to Mask of Destiny, actually, was the first Bionicle fan site that I found. And then from there I learned about BZ Power.
Mm. Interesting. So that's very... Usually I find that it's the complete opposite. People end up on BZ Power, and then eventually they'll hear of Mask of Destiny either through BZ Power's filter, or they kind of just stumble across it somehow thereafter. But that's
Mhm.
fascinating. Now, you have kind of a unique experience from what I've encountered, because when it came to Bionicle, I was usually on the up and up when it came to the biggest and brightest, the newest and greatest in set photos. So if there were any leaks, I'd usually find out about them somehow. Specifically, like the Anika, some of the Mari, obviously the Glatorian, as you mentioned. But you got the opportunity to just see them all fresh and in their presentable state, the intended viewing experience. What was it like for you when you just went into the catalog and were like, "Whoa, they're just totally new"?
It was exciting. It was always fun. I'll mention actually here that I actually even was way into Bionicle sets and stuff, but I never paid that much attention to the actual release schedule, I guess. So I wasn't even sort of consciously aware that like, oh, there's like a summer wave and a winter wave. So for me, it was just the Lego Shop at Home catalog would show up, and I would look through it to the Bionicle section immediately, see like, is there new stuff or not? And if there wasn't, I was always bummed out. And when there was, it was very exciting.
Mm-hmm. All right, that I mean, hey, that's really cool. I subscribed to the catalogs, but I did not go to them for my set fix, as it were.
Mm.
Um, did you ever get into any other Lego system themes throughout the years?
So I've always gotten like some system sets. So I'm trying to think if there's any like particular system theme I've been way into, and I'm sort of drawing a blank. I get some here and there that are cool.
Mhm.
Um, like the Johnny Thunder stuff, I guess. When I was
Mm-hmm.
younger, I tended to like, I guess, more of the sort of action-oriented stuff, but particularly if they had any kind of construction influence. Like I got way into Knight's Kingdom for a little
Ah,
bit back when
yeah.
that was a thing, and I was one of the like handful of big Galador fans back when Galador was active.
Oh my goodness, one of few.
Yeah, I still have a near complete Galador collection from back then,
Well, what are you missing?
pretty much. I'm missing the torso of God. I can't remember what the name of it is. Like the orange guy who was, I believe, only released in Europe. I think he didn't make it to the U.S.
Oh, I want to say Awkward, but I know that's
Yeah.
not right. Oh, I feel like it's not right. It's been a while since I've seen those names as well.
hmm But yes, I had everything that was released in the U.S. and then a friend had gotten like a couple, like the two, I guess two that were only released in Europe from like family members that had been traveling or something, and he didn't want them anymore, so he gave them to me. But he was missing the torso of that one.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously, since you haven't mentioned it, I'm assuming you have the bike, of course.
The bike was not released, so
Yeah.
that as well. Actually, that's sort of a related thing.
Hmm.
Since I was not involved with any of like the online community or anything, I was so confused by that bike because it was in like marketing and stuff, and
Yeah.
I was like, it was like, oh, that looks really cool, and then it just never materialized, and I was like, does it exist somewhere? Like, did that happen?
Yeah.
For
No,
years I never knew if it was real.
it's fascinating. Did you get to see it last year at Brick Fair? Like, did you see it in person?
I don't I think I did. I'm trying to remember if I actually saw it in person or just saw the pictures online.
Because I know because I did a lot of hanging out around that area, the Galador
hmm
Bionicle area, and either talking to Alex or talking to Nick, or talking to Matthew, and goodness, Alex was fiddling with it on numerous occasions and taking a bunch of photos, and it's a novelty, that's for darn sure. I would not have paid the price he paid for it, but you know what? Eye of the beholder.
Yep.
So, but all right, a couple of other rudimentary questions before we get into the meat and potatoes of this. Do you have a favorite and or least favorite Bionicle set that you got and or saw over the years?
Well, I can answer favorite pretty well because I was just doing that little like one answer thing on Twitter recently, and that was one of the questions. So I've been thinking about this already.
Mhm.
Uh, think favorite set has to be either Lycan and Kikanalo or Brutaka.
Both solid choices. All right, fair. Connoisseur of gold, I take it.
I wouldn't have even said so until I sat down and like went through and thought about it, and those two were kind of what I thought of as favorites. So maybe, yeah, I guess so.
Fair, fair. All right, and yeah, I understand the least favorite might be a little bit of a harder question to kind of tackle. Like it would take me a little bit as well. So that is fair.
Yeah, it especially because like is it least favorite looking back objectively at all the sets now, or like least favorite based on the emotions I have attached to them, right? Because like there's early sets that certainly I wouldn't love as much as I do now if I hadn't first encountered them when I was 8.
Hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. Like I keep on saying, I think there's a strong argument that the Mictoran are the worst Bionicle sets ever released. I love them to death. I think they're fantastic. I can't recommend them enough, but I think there is a reasonable argument that they suck horrifically.
Yeah, that's fair. Because like I personally, like a lot of people, I think, don't care for Tor and Agori build that became a thing for so long because it's so simple and boring. But if you think about it, like something like the Mictoran is just as simple but less posable.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have your little Mictoran, and not only does it have yeah, about 4 points of articulation, all of which are on one axis, but they only end up sharing one three total pieces, technically four, with any other Bionicle set. And when it comes to the feet, it's generally only other Matoran, with maybe one or two exceptions. Then you have the disc, and well, it's just a disc. It doesn't really click into anything. Then you have the head, and that only really got as far as the O3 Matoran. And then you have the masks, and I mean, those are masks. So it's like outside of that, all the other pieces look like they don't really belong to anything. They're still somewhat compatible, but they're almost Galador-y in their execution.
yeah.
But obviously, of course, I still have an immense catering toward them. I really do enjoy them, of course.
Sure.
All right. So that all out of the way, we'll obviously get to more questions later. We have a question segment toward the end. But first, let's go ahead and start talking about this. So biological chronicle, which, if anyone unaware, that's what bionicle means. It's not biomechanical chronicle. It's not anything along those lines. It's biological. It's a major compilation. You have basically all of the books, the Monog walkthrough, all of the comics, or as many as you can get a hold of, the young reader books, a whole slew of things. Take us through, first of all, the beginning of this. What prompted you to make this? How did it start? And what went into the creation of this absolutely substantial resource?
Sure. Well, first, one quick clarification.
Hmm.
Uh, this does not contain all of the comics in
Oh.
an effort to avoid too much redundancy, basically. It includes
Ah,
every comic that has story material that isn't covered elsewhere.
that is fair. That's a really good clarification to make.
Um, it's hard to say exactly where it started because this has sort of been an idea rattling around in my head for years now. Um, I should mention, I when I was growing up, actually read really any of the Bionicle chapter books. I was a comic and movie guy. I was kind of unaware, I think, back then that the books contained so much story material not covered by the comics.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I tried like one or something like that, and I was like, this just feels like a long form version of comic, right? This feels like it's basically covering the same ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really read any others until when I was in college. Um, I was basically reading them, talking to a friend who informed me that they did actually have a lot of different stuff in them.
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, oh, okay, if because I'd sort of had this idea of like, what if I together this whole thing that was like all of the comics and the serials just like in a reading order. Um, just like as this vague idea in my head. And it was after that when I was reading the books that I was like, oh, that if you were
Mm-hmm.
actually going to have a complete version of the Bionicle story, you definitely need to prioritize the books.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I started sort of after I'd actually made sure that I had read everything Bionicle, right? So I read all the because I hadn't ever read the fan written canon stories either, and I went back and read those. I started sort of plotting it out. Okay, like here's sort of how these should probably be arranged in a way that makes the most sense to read. Like put this chapter first, and then this chapter from that other thing. Uh, Obstacle for me was getting all that book text into a format that I could do something with.
Mm-hmm.
Getting it like transcribed into just like a Word doc or something. And I spent a while digging through the internet. I found like this old like Reddit thread where there was like a group of people trying to like work together to do it in like a Google Doc. And I think it just like the project had started and then fallen apart at some point. So they had like Chronicles 1 and like the first two chapters of Chronicles 2 done or something like that. And I was like, well, I guess it's a starting point.
Reasonable.
Yeah. Um so oh there was a hmm?
Oh no, please continue, please.
So let me know if I'm going into too much detail or
Oh,
anything, by the
go
way.
as much detail as you would like, by all means.
There was a thread posted on BZ Power. Gosh, I guess it would have been early 2017. I believe the user's name is Molnar Noah. Started putting together. They're really cool. I don't know how many he's gotten through at this point. He'd only done like a couple at the time. He was making PDF versions of the chapter books exactly as they originally were, basically. So like the chapter headers are the same. There's the same number of words per page and everything. All the margins and formatting. It basically like is as if you had like super high quality like, but actually like as a PDF with like the text searchable and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I saw that and was like, oh hey, if you are transcribing the book texts to do this, is there any way I could, use that or borrow that or something, the original text that you're transcribing to do this? I said I was interested in using it for a personal project I was working on. I didn't want to talk too much about it at the time because I was still sort of trying to keep it under wraps. Because if I was able to do this, I wanted it to be like a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and BIONICLE messaged me. He saw my post about that and was like, "Hey, I saw that you were looking for, the chapter book texts like transcribed digitally to use for some sort of compilation thing. I did that a while back. Basically, had just all of it. He had done a sort of story compilation of his own, basically for private use, to my understanding. It was less sort of less edited and interwoven than Biological Chronicle is, and didn't include a lot of the stuff that Biological Chronicle does. It was mostly just the books and the serials arranged in order. But he sent me that whole thing. He just got started working from there.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I had a lot of back and forth during the whole initial creation process. I kept asking him for feedback on stuff and what he thought of certain ideas and things. So I was, I am largely the one that put the whole project as it is together, but I really couldn't have done it without his help.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. I did not realize he had that level of involvement because, as I'd mentioned right before we started, I obviously have some familiarity with him because we've worked together on his motion comics, which are so much fun. Um, Obviously, I play exactly who you think I'd play. I'm Maku in them. But outside of that, I was a fan of his comics on BZ Power, and seeing his name kind of come back into the community and recirculate, and especially with this, has been really exciting. It's been really cool to see that. But I did not realize that's the extent of the involvement he had. So that's really fantastic. Now, oh no, continue, please.
Oh, I go ahead. I wasn't about to say anything.
Fantastic. On the topic that you have here, you've posted this to several different branches of the community, which is excellent. As much coverage as this can get would be wonderful. You have a variety of collections, as it were. There are a lot of different iterations that you have. First, you have books 1 through 10, and above all of those, you have complete collections, but there are different versions of them. Explain to anyone who may be unfamiliar with them what these all are.
Yes, this has been a bit of an obstacle is trying to make sure that this is all very clearly explained in the topic because I'm really just trying to give everyone the experience that they want to have. First of all, I made the decision early on to break up the whole thing into sort of volumes by year. I did that rather than sort of preserving like the original start and end of each individual like chapter book or serial or whatever. Is that by the time you get to when you get to certain years, especially like 2007 or 2008, putting everything in what I'd consider an ideal sort of reading order, where you're reading everything sort of chronologically as it happens in a way that makes a new reader the least confused. Uh, it would get way too messy to try to keep the divisions by the original books, if that makes sense. Putting up chapters and texts so much to the point where those lines don't often make sense anymore. But where there always is really sort of a relatively clean storyline break is of course at the end and beginning of a new story year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's the 10 volumes there, and then there's also the PDFs that can all 10 volumes in one PDF if you feel like downloading a 2,000 page PDF to your computer at one time. uh, uh, a quick side note: I which are names of my own creation. Each volume's name is just a one word descriptor that I think sort of encapsulates that year's story in some way. But I will mention that I am currently taking suggestions for new names for the volumes because I've had a lot of feedback on like certain ones that people think could be different or maybe should be something else. So and they have an idea for like, oh, I think this is a really good phrase or word or whatever that encapsulates the story of this year. Send it my way, anywhere. I'll be holding polls later to decide what the final volume names should be.
Okay, interesting, because yeah, I do see them. Some of them I feel make pretty perfect sense. Sacrifice Rising Destiny, especially. However, I can see how you might receive some feedback for a few, such as for '06 Doomed, or '03 being Masks. But that's cool, though. That's really cool that you're taking feedback and taking suggestions. So I've linked to at least the TTV message board topic in the YouTube live chat, so that is there. And for anyone listening to this after the live stream, a link will, of course, be in the description below. So when it came to the project, first of all, the order for this, who is intended to be the one going through all of this? What is the recommended way that you would suggest somebody approach all of the content here?
So since I don't feel like I actually quite completely answered your previous question, but it relates to this one, I'll try to answer both.
Certainly.
With the I addressed sort of the different volumes, but not their different versions regarding your previous question.
Yes.
The idea going into this was someone trying to go back and read the entire Bionicle story now, who has not read all of it, maybe hasn't read any of it, is massive pain. Like you can
Mhm.
find some like reading orders online and stuff, but then you have to dig up each of those story sources and everything. And sometimes it's like you can tell someone, oh, read chapter 4 of this and then chapter 6 of this, but that can be annoying when it's like 3 or 4 different things happening simultaneously and they're having to literally like pick up a book and read a chapter and then go on their computer to a serial and read part of that.
Mhm.
um, so the idea is to make it all one easy to read format. But of course, the issue that can create is there's a lot of Bionicle media that has contradictions. There are versions of the story that are told
What?
slightly differently or using
Oh.
slightly different forms of media. Tried to do is for those fans that did grow up with certain pieces of media and prefer those. I have tried to give different options, basically, for what you want. So, for book one, for example, the 2001 story, uh, Toa fight was written in that book by Kathy Hopka, is not canon. It's not
Mhm.
official.
Yep.
There was, however, in the Bionicle Style Guide, Bionicle Synopsis, a written version of basically a official version of basically how that fight went. So that is what is included in the default sort of primary version of Biological Chronicle. Is I have spliced that official version of the fight into the text.
Mhm.
But I know that there's some people who probably read the Chronicles books growing up and they want that. So I have what is referred to as the Hopka version of book one, which has the original text as she wrote it.
Mhm.
Things like that. Um, but basically, if you're a new reader looking at this and you don't know where to start, just start with the versions that are labeled standard/recommended, either the complete collection or just start from book one. That is designed to be the easiest reading experience that preserves the most canon, basically.
Mhm. All right. So, and the way these are set up is, of course, they are individual, separate. You can go into these in, say, an alternative order. So, for instance, if someone wanted to go through the Bionicle story chronologically, not necessarily in how we experienced it, but from a story perspective, straight through how it played out in air quotes canon, they could just jump to book 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Uh, yes, I mean they certainly could. You'd miss a few things there in 2009, I guess, where 2009 had a lot of flashbacks to like 100,000 years ago and stuff.
That is true.
Um, sure, I mean yes. I don't know that that was really my thought when I broke them up that way. But certainly yes.
Excellent. So that there is a lot of course, utility there. Um, when it came to assembling everything, what has been the hardest part about bringing all of this in one place?
Uh, so one hardest part. There's a lot of things where there's a lot of compromises that have to be made, I guess, with a lot of stuff with this. Trying to think of a good example offhand. So what's hard sometimes is just deciding what gets priority.
Hmm.
So, for instance, for movies 2 and 3, both retread stuff from the previous novels because the movies did, and therefore the movie novelizations do. So, for instance, like Web of Shadows is just like the first chunk of Web of the Visorak, It just
Mm-hmm.
like cuts back to that and walks you through that again, and then like jumps past Challenge of the Hordika into the actual like Web of Shadows storyline. So what I've done for those is tried to tread right. I don't want, because that is confusing to a new reader without the context of like, oh, this was a movie, so that's why you're being sent back to read a different version of the same thing again.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to splice those things together, but it's hard to know like, okay, which of these, for when two texts have the same scene described in different words, which one takes precedence, which one gets kept.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has been either calculated decisions on my part or feedback from readers, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's understandable. It's not something I think even I would have considered starting something like this, because right, there is a lot of, I think you put it very well earlier, a lot of redundancies in Bionicle media.
Yeah. It's that trick of removing the redundancy without removing any of the story, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course that's quite hard to do. I can definitely see that being a challenge. Now, this is a question that popped into my mind. I want to say a few days ago, and I'm pretty sure you're probably fine here. Um, but I think someone had brought it up. The legality of having all this content in one place online. Have you looked into that? Everything seem pretty on the up and up.
So this is something that I was, I guess, a little worried about when I first started this project. Um, I haven't been reached out to by Scholastic or anything, with like a cease and desist or anything like that. I like. I mean, I'm of course not selling any of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no personal profit here, and like to think that presenting the story in this way is transformative from the original books in a way. I'm not literally taking the books and posting them online,
Mm-hmm.
but it's you know a hazy line, I guess. But
That's fair.
the the way I see it is, if anyone's buying the actual books these days and Lego aren't profiting off that, you know what I mean? They're not still being ordered from them to bookstores or whatever. You're just buying it secondhand from someone. They're not losing out on anything because of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Someone actually asked me about at one point about doing something similar for Bionicle G2, and basically my response was like, well, one, that's like 5 books in a show. I don't know that there's the same need.
It's not that hard to follow. Yeah.
um, but also like when they asked me about it, it was like a year and a half ago maybe. I'm like, those books are like still on Amazon and like Barnes and Noble and stuff. Like you can still buy those,
Mm-hmm.
like brand new. And I'd rather people go out and support that official release while that's still possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes plenty of sense. Like I said, I think you're pretty much on the up and up. Um, Heck, at some point, you remember Bionicle, is that right? Okay. At some point, might even be worth pulling a Biomedia Project. Biomedia Project is another. It's a website which, of course, has a slew of Bionicle related media. So videos, games, uh, instructions, I think, comics, scans of the comics, whole slew of stuff. I have it on good authority. They do have a clear A-OK from the company. Yes, so long as you're a nonprofit and you're not making any money off of anything you're hosting on the website, you can host all of that on your website. You're fine. All the videos, all the games, all the download links for the games. Like, I think there was a big deal recently. They had Bionicle Heroes up as like, oh no, who benefits from this, who doesn't? Is that a big deal? Because you have TT games, and then you have Lego. Both those are still around.
Mhm.
Bionicle Heroes allowed to be online. Apparently, it was fine. So it might be worth talking to Black Six, saying, "Hey, can you go through the proper channels through the ambassador network, see if we can get a okay."
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but yeah, that's something to consider.
Now, of course, there's always the counter possibility. It'll be a little bit of a Streisand effect, like it will find out about it and be like, no. But I highly
Yeah.
doubt that'd be an issue because you're right. Scholastic hasn't reached out to you. Scholastic isn't selling them. Lego isn't selling them. They don't really care. And I do think you have a reasonable transformative work argument standing, especially like the worst I could see them doing is saying you have to take out everything that isn't the standard or recommended versions. That is the worst I could see them doing. Something to consider, I suppose. Now, going through this project, do you have a part of it that you're significantly proud of, like something that jumps out to you? You're like perfection.
uh, the thing that comes to mind immediately, I guess, is and it's actually one of the earliest parts of this I worked on. I guess is the ordering of everything for 2007.
Hmm.
And that it took. It was the one that took a very long time, but by the time I finished figuring out how to order everything, all the cereals and all of that, it it felt basically, and I think it's one of the few things that I've received basically no feedback on the arrangement of since first uploading the project.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's one of those things where it was like I had a ton of puzzle pieces on the table because there's like three 2007 serials, I think.
I'm actually gonna lean a little more toward four. Let me look that up.
Yeah, for the Dreams of Destruction, Dwellers in Darkness, TuragaNuva blog.
Nope, you were right. Yep, it's just three.
Basically, it's one of those things where like because 2008 was also a pain to arrange, but it's like and every setting all at the same time, which
Mm-hmm.
is why it's a hard thing to arrange. Whereas 2007 was sort of like there's an order to this because it's basically all one setting.
Yeah,
You can figure it out and make it all work. And once I did, I feel like it flows very well.
yeah,
Intended on the underwater year there.
yeah. I specifically remember because I had drafted at some point. So my friend Messa, he was binging the entirety of the Bionicle story to show his girlfriend, and they were both going through it, and they're like, "Hey, can you recommend us the proper order of chronological order of things per year?" And most of them, I only did like '05 through to '08, I want to say, and '05 and '06 are pretty simple. Book, comic, book, comic, book, comic, book, comic, book, comic, movie. End. Really straightforward. And then you hit '07 and it's book, comic, serial chapter 1 through 3, book, comic, serial chapter, another serial chapter 1 through 3, serial chapter 6 through 9, book, comic, another serial chapter 2 through to 4, and it was like a ladder that had been broken up, so you're just trying to carefully climb that ladder in a very specific order, making sure not to hit the wrong rung. And so yeah, no, I can absolutely understand why you pick that specifically to be really proud of assembling because it's a mess. It's a horrific mess.
Yeah, but yeah, it's there's even places where like because I guess just for clarity's sake here because I don't know if I've mentioned this so far. Not just things aren't just spliced together by chapter; they're spliced together in some cases by line of text. Um, so there's actually places where parts of the serials. I think it's the last chapter of. Do not remember if it's Dreams of Destruction or Dwellers in Darkness, but there's like the last chapter of one of those is like Maxilo's frozen. fits so perfectly between two paragraphs of Downfall that it almost feels like Greg wrote it in that initially, and it was like cut for page count or something by the editors, and he's like, I'll just make it the last chapter of this serial.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that would not surprise me given how many cuts are made in '07 specifically. So that's
Yeah.
fascinating. I never made that correlation. When it comes to the serial length and assembly, obviously '07 is the worst offender. But at the same time, as we just established, '07 had 3 serials. '08 had 7. If you're
Yeah.
counting the TuragaNuva blog, which I can see why one would not. How did that go? How was that process for you?
2008 is I think book 8 of Biological Chronicle, the 2008 stuff, is the one that has gone through the most rearrangement back. It has been I haven't moved anything around in it in a while. I feel like it's sort of reached a good state, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a time where like I want to say it's gone through like 5 or 6 revisions, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the volumes have gone through a lot of revisions for typo fixes, but I mean like purely revisions for like moving chapters around and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's interesting. I think 2007 is the year that sort of is the proof of concept of Biological Chronicle, my compilation, and book 8 is the one that tries its hardest to prove that this isn't going to work.
That's a great juxtaposition.
Yep. Because basically 2008 is the one that I guess sort of took advantage the most of being this sort of multimedia storyline to be like, okay, here's like 10 different story threads, and all of them happen at the same time, but they're all about different people in different places.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it is just literally like read chapter 1 of everything and then read chapter 2 of everything.
Yeah,
But
it's pretty
it gets it gets
linear.
it gets more complicated than that in places, especially because like the length of time that it takes for TuragaNuva to do his like 3 separate alternate dimension adventures comparatively to the amount of time that passes elsewhere gets annoying to figure out,
Mm-hmm.
based on when he leaves and when he comes back and stuff like that. It's If I still had my notes, I don't think I do anymore, but I remember just going through the chapters and making notes of the key events, basically, of each chapter of each serial and book from that year and everything. And it'd be like, okay, I just have to establish a set of rules for like, this has to happen before that. The reader has to know about this before that happens, and then like sort of piece it together based on those rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about what I'd expect trying to tackle this. Oh goodness, how did you how did you settle the disparity between which one was it? Yeah, the final battle and the TuragaNuva blog. If you're familiar with what I'm referring to,
Which bit, if you can clarify?
TuragaNuva meeting up with Galen Pohatu.
Oh, I mean, room for it to have happened. Yeah. I mean, even if it's not, is it book has anything that states that it couldn't have happened? The comics might?
Comics didn't feature that occurrence.
Okay. Well, no, I know they didn't feature that happening, but I'm like, I guess I'm not sure quite what you're asking. Is there actually like a contradiction, or are you just referring to how the books don't show that meeting?
No, the book.
Or no, they do. That's yeah.
So there's a significant difference in how they address it. So I want to say it's the TuragaNuva blog where it's they meet and Gally is like, "Hey, who are you?" Wait, no, never mind. Let me use the Monog thing, and figure out that you're Takua. and they do that, and then Pohatu comes up, and it's all hunky dory. But in the book, Pohatu's like, if you don't prove it, I'm just gonna blast you. Like,
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes.
there's
All right.
a
It's
slight
it's
disparity.
been so long. It's been so long since I've dealt with some of these things that it takes me a minute to remember.
Oh yeah.
Um, I believe I just eliminated the blog that directly contradicted what happened in the book, if memory serves.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I gave the book's precedence in most cases.
That's fair. I feel like that is a, a bit of a pivotal question. There's always been debate on this specific subject as to what bionicle media takes precedent over other. And some people say movies above all, some will say books above all, some will say comics. Do you have a personal standard for what takes precedent, or is your standard for what does essentially what has gone into Biological Chronicle?
I guess yes, I'd say my standard for what does is basically what has gone into Biological Chronicle. There are maybe occasional cases where a reader or readers might disagree with something that I've given precedence over something else and will let me know. And if there's enough, consensus that it should be a different way, then I'll change it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, generally the approach I took was giving text precedence. Oh, so basically, any comic that covers the exact same material of text I did not include. Uh, but if a comic contradicts the text, especially early on, where the books were being written by Hopka, so it's usually considered less canon, I would eliminate the part of the text that contradicts the comic.
Interesting. Okay. That is a fascinating methodology of going about it.
And the movies are sometimes a pain. Um, Generally, it's not too bad because usually I don't know. So for instance, let's say TuragaNuva, the movie novelization has its own version of the scene from Adventures One, where the Toa Metru have just become Toa Metru, and they're all talking about it, and they pick their weapons, and Bakama has his vision and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's lines from that people remember very well because you tend to remember lines like that better when you hear them being said and see them. But there's things from the Adventures One version that kind of have to happen, like Bakama's vision, including the Morbazak and the Great Discs and such, which are not
Ooh.
really mentioned in the movie version because it just doesn't care that the Morbazak exists.
Yeah.
Um, so I basically went through both scenes line by line and preserved everything from both possible. So what you will read in Biological Chronicle Book 4 is a hybridization of both scenes where, if someone says the exact same thing twice, it's not in there twice. Um, it's about all of everybody's lines are in there unless it feels like they're repeating themselves. Vakama's vision sort of everything from both that isn't again redundant with itself, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I mean, that's a good way of going about it. I'm obviously a lot of work.
Yes.
No, that is fair. Okay. So I can at least, for starters, I can vouch. Like, all of this is immensely well structured. Like, obviously, I mentioned earlier, Meso had gone through it, and it's a really good way of comprehending the full story. Right now, are you currently looking for anything that needs to be added? Is there something that you're searching for? Is there something you need written down? Is there anything you feel needs to be represented here, or do you feel like it is in a state that is pretty good outside of maybe some tweaks that you're still going over and hearing back about?
So it's a bit of a tricky question because there's so much Bionicle media out there that there's a lot that I've learned existed while working on this. When I went into this, there's so many things I just didn't even know existed. Like I didn't know when I started about the Legend of Lewa comic, I believe it's called,
Mm-hmm.
which, despite Greg saying at some point offhandedly that it was canon, cannot physically fit into the existing story, so it's not
Wait,
included.
he's he says I've only ever heard that the Legend of Lee was non-canon.
Uh, well, someone may
Because
have misinformed me at some point, but someone brought it up as for potentially including.
I've never heard him suggest. If there's a source for it, I'd be cool to see it. But as far as I'm aware, he has actively said quite the contrary, that it's not canon. Because, well, put bluntly, he didn't write it.
That's fair. Well, it couldn't fit anyway, so it's not in. But
Yeah.
yeah, that and like there's story material. There's like a story passage from the collector's sticker book that I did not know existed until someone just chimed in and was like, "Hey, do you have that?" I was like, do I have what?"
Passage from the
But
collector sticker book.
yes, there's a thing called "Beware the Infected Kanohi," written in universe by Takua, which is actually a somewhat significant piece of story material that I did not know about because it is the thing that established that the Toa could combine their elemental powers to heal things. Like,
Really?
apparently, that's what they did to the infected masks. That's how they got rid of all the infected masks from the Rahi, is they figured out they could use their elemental powers to cure them, and that's why they know that they can do that to help Tahu later.
See if I have this. Is it Bionicle Collector's sticker book, you said?
I believe that's what it's called, Ultimate Collector Sticker Book, something like that. I don't own it, but someone sent me photos that I transcribed the text from.
Yeah, okay, yep. Alright, yeah, I see it now. It comes from Beware the Infected Kanohi. That's fascinating. I've never read this. I own two of this. I've literally never read this before. My goodness.
So
What?
this is the kind of thing you learn about while working on something like this.
No kidding. That's fascinating. Holy taquitos. Okay.
So, anyways, right now there is not really anything that I'm aware of that I think still needs to be included, other than something I'm forever to hear back about. I don't know if you've seen my post on the TTV boards in the Ask Greg section, but I decided to ask Greg, since he's able to communicate with the community again these days, if he would finally make an official statement as to whether that last round of fan contest winners that were meant to be canonized are officially canon or not. There were some fan written stories made into canon when they won, but by the time they won the contest, that thing happened where Greg wasn't supposed to interact with the community anymore or something.
Oh, yes, I
Um,
remember these.
Yeah, so I went through, read all of them, made notes of everything that contradicts existing canon, made a post on the Ask Greg just saying, hey, if you could just give an official final statement either way as to whether these are canon or not, that'd be awesome. And he has not gotten back to me. I understand it's a lot to read through and that he's a busy man, and he probably will not get back to it. But if he ever does state that those are canon in some capacity, they will be going in somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I completely and utterly. First of all, I gotta read through these. These seem like good things to at least know of. And second of all, yeah, I don't even know if Greg hasn't. Oh, probably bump this topic. I'll do that real quick. Um, so Greg on the message boards is very fascinating. Bump and then delete the post, so I'll do it. He's very sporadic. There's basically no consistency to him being on the boards, and he's very fascinatingly selective with certain questions. This, I think, is something that would fascinate him, but I think you're right. There's just so much content here. He might not just
Mhm.
have the time to address it all. So
Yeah.
that might be it.
Yes, I tried to make it as easy to go through as possible as I could. Like I individually linked to each of the stories and everything. But yeah, I totally understand if it's just not something he's able to do these days.
Hmm. Yeah, but that would be fascinating to see if we can get a resolution there. Of course, I would also be fond of story wholesale, but that's just
Oh yeah, related to that,
hmm.
quick note. You may have already seen, I don't know if it's come up, but break off the all of the serials that take place post any story content that takes place after Journey's End. I broke off into volume 10 of Biological Chronicle, which is just titled Epilogue. And I actually put an editor's note at the beginning, written a little nicer than this, but effectively saying, hey, these don't end. So
Yeah,
if you want to read more story that doesn't go anywhere, go ahead. But if you're satisfied with it just being over, then stop here.
yeah, that's fair. So basically, this is only for epilogue. It's just yesterday quest and the powers that be.
It is also Samad's Tale because it takes place pretty much entirely after the the big robot fight, Journey's End stuff.
Reasonable. However, that does also end.
It does, and it was tricky to make that decision, but I didn't feel like the end of the story as a whole should be you read the end of Journey's End and then you read Samad's Tale.
That is fair. Yeah, no,
Especially
that.
because while Samad's Tale does technically end, it establishes a lot of new story elements and stuff that were clearly meant to be built on later that
Mhm.
never are.
Yeah, especially Anona. Yeah,
Yeah, basically a no-no.
that's fair. And I much prefer the way that you are going about it. I've said this for many, many, many years. It's Bionicle has had an ending. It did end. It just continued after that end, and then that continuation did not finish. So I really do prefer how you have it set up here, where yeah, the ending exists. It ends. There's just more afterwards that your mileage may vary with. So okay, would you be interested in taking some questions that have been sent in and will be sent in?
That's fine with me.
Fantastic. All right, in that case, I'm going to open things up to questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the YouTube live chat. First, I will ask, now that this is all done, and obviously tweaks are being made, what do you see yourself doing next? What's your next big project to tackle?
Uh, well, I think saying that this is almost done is a little bit of an overstatement because while at this point mostly just typo fixes and things, it is effectively finished. Um, a lot of interest in alternate ways, alternate formats, basically. So I don't want to go into too much detail because I hate announcing that I'm going to do stuff before I do it because it always takes me way longer to do it than I expect. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking into making like EPUB versions of this and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do an alternately formatted version designed for printing because I would never sell them, but I'm personally interested in just sort of having a printed like bound copy of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Need to of course reformat it to be more optimized for that with like gutters on the pages and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sort of the main goal right now. I don't want to start setting my sights on other projects until I've really wrapped up everything I want to do with this.
Mm-hmm. And that's entirely reasonable. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense going forward. Okay. All right. In that case, let's go ahead and tackle a few of these questions. The email question that had been sent in was from Spidey Central, who had his question answered. It was, what was your biggest challenge faced while making it? However, he also adds, thank you so much for making it. I was finally able to get my friends into Bionicle because of it, and I finally don't look like a weirdo talking about it.
Well, I really appreciate hearing that because that is basically one of the primary goals of this whole thing, is to make this more shareable, because I think there's a lot of us out there that feel that way, that are very invested in this story and grew up with it and love it, but it's a very hard story to sort of introduce people to, or share with people, because it's very intimidating when presented as comics and books and serials and all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah,
um, so yes, I'm happy to hear that there are new people being introduced to this because of Biological Chronicle.
that's excellent. Fantastic. And obviously, I know that. Yeah, no, I've seen it tested. It's wonderful. Okay, YouTube comments. The first is from Spidey Central, who asks, TuragaNuva, favorite slash least favorite cereal? Mine are either Birth of a Dark Hunter and Smad's Tale, but what are yours?
Whew, okay, I have a hard time with these questions when I haven't been given time to think about them.
Fair.
But spur of the moment, favorite and least favorite. Um, think through all of the cereals in my head. Okay. Don't call this a definitive answer because it's just off the top of my head. But I really like Brothers in Arms.
Mm.
I really enjoyed. I liked sort of getting a closer look at some Matoran again, because it felt like it had been since we'd gotten that at that point, I guess. You know, like there were a few Matoran, I guess, in like Sarda and Idris did some stuff in '07, very sort of more primarily focused around a Matoran was cool.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, no, Brothers in Arms is a good one. That is definitely
Uh,
a solid one.
Brit is difficult. Am I allowed to pick uh like Powers That Be or Yesterday Quest for upsetting me by not finishing?
No, absolutely not. You're not allowed to do that. I won't let. Yeah, absolutely, of course. Yeah, no, that's such a massive flaw. It's terrible.
Because I just can't think of one offhand where I'm like, oh, I really didn't like that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, you know what? I'm changing my favorite answer. I just remembered what my actual favorite is. Do call this my definitive answer.
Okay.
Uh, Federation of Fear.
Okay. I figured it was either going to be that one or Dark Mirror. Dark Mirror is a real popular one, but Federation of Fear has a lot of good stuff in it.
Federation of Fear is wonderful. Yes, I
Mhm.
adore it.
Yeah. I, on the topic of your least favorite, specifically Powers or Yesterday Quest or Powers That Be, how do you feel about the Red Star in Powers That Be?
How do I feel about it being a resurrection spaceship?
Yeah.
Um, it's I have mixed feelings. It's that Greg kind of came out and said that he just did that because he wanted to do a story about zombies on a spaceship.
Hmm.
uh, and I know there's some people out there who are like, oh man, I hate that he's like changing what stuff was originally meant to be or whatever. But I think some people don't realize how much of the Bionicle story is just something Greg, like something that crossed Greg's mind and he thought it'd be cool, so he wrote it. Um, that's a lot of what the story is. So uh, some of the ideas that crazy ideas that come to his head, I'm not as huge a fan of. Some I am. And the whole Red Star thing just struck me as another one of those where it's like this is weird. I'm going to wait and see where it goes. And of course, we never got to see where it went. But
Hmm. Yeah. I on those two notes, I feel like a lot of people underestimate and overestimate very wildly Greg's involvement. Like obviously he was the writer and he was kind of the public face of the story team, but like I'll see all the time people decrying Greg. It's like, darn you, Greg, you ruined Bionicle, stupid. Why'd they make you the head of the story team? And then I'll
Oh,
see
he's not.
exactly, right? And he was never the head of the story team. The only one that I know of was Bob Thompson from '01, or when Bionicle started, prior to '01 to '05. That's the only guy. Greg was never the head of the story team, but people they just think he is because obviously he's a public face. He's a public image to us.
And I should clarify that my statement about how much is just crazy stuff that crosses Greg's mind largely extends to the serials more
Yeah,
so than
yeah.
anything else, because the serials were mostly just his thing.
Yes, yeah, that is accurate. Yeah, so it's like story stuff, like book stuff. That's usually stuff that he wrote, but he wrote it around a story team framework. But yeah, serials, he almost had entirely free reign there.
Yeah, it is interesting. The couple books where he was given more free reign. Of course, I know everybody loves Time Trap.
Of course. Yeah. Time Trap's it's a solid entry. I'm a little more partial to Downfall myself, but
It's fair.
And on the note of the Red Star, I'm not gonna lie, this is one of my controversial hot takes. I actually think it makes entirely perfect sense within the confines of the world.
Interesting.
I have no qualms with. I think the only issue I have with it is from a narrative perspective. Because when you have a character die, that's the ultimate risk. You're risking a character no longer being a factor in a story. So anytime they make a decision that could risk them dying, and they die, they're gone. That's it. They made their choice. They made the ultimate sacrifice. That's the ultimate end to a character's death. And so to have that walked back on is one of the most offensive things you could do in a story, especially for characters like Turagali Khan.
I can certainly agree with that. The idea that so many characters whose deaths were such a big deal at the time that they happened to just be like, oh, actually they've just been, up in space hanging out.
Yeah, just chilling.
Is it what was sort of upsetting. It's interesting too because it feels like Greg understood that to a degree. There's one very significant character who was established to actually be permanently dead. He is not on the Red Star. And so you can tell that Greg, that there was going to be that backlash at that idea of bringing back people whose deaths were important, but apparently he only thought it was a big enough deal to make a exception for one person.
Yeah. Well, okay. So who are you talking about when you say one person?
I believe Matoro is officially dead. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Matoro is dead. He also made this specification for all Makuta and specifically Pterodex.
Oh well. Yes. I guess I should have clarified. Yes, that the Makuta are also all dead because they work different.
Yeah. There's a list of revived beings on BSO1 on the Red Star page, and if anyone is interested in learning who is still alive, technically speaking, who is still alive, it is a massively fascinating list to look through when you really think about it. Like Jovan is still up there, Lee Khan as aforementioned, Nocturne, who died off page only to be off page resurrected. It's really that's funny. And like a whole slew of Toe of Iron and Magnetism, like basically all of them that didn't get disintegrated. So that's like from a narrative perspective, I think it's cheap. I think it can be worked around. Like if you just blow up the Red Star with everyone on it, self-correcting issue, because narratively the Red Star doesn't have a functionality anymore because the MU is destroyed. But from an in-universe perspective, its existence makes perfect sense. You'd want to have a place to repair broken worker bots inside of your giant robot.
That's fair. It's one of those things too where I think a lot of people were against it because what the original idea behind the Red Star was, right? Because in the plans from the beginning, so there are people that are like, well, was there some mystery to it that we didn't get to find out that was actually changed or taken out of the plans or whatever? which I understand. There's a lot of Bionicle stuff like that where it's like clearly plans were changed. Clearly this didn't go the way things were originally going to. And I would love to know what the original stuff was going to be, but that doesn't make what they made the story less valid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like things change during the process. That just happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
There seems to be
Exactly.
this mentality that because things aren't the way they exactly were planned to be in the original story Bible, it's not the true story.
Yeah. I don't think that's really a healthy way of looking at things when it comes to discussing and interacting with Bionicle. And especially considering, like, before, what the Red Star was a glorified backpack. It's like its purpose was to help the Great Spirit Robot break free from the gravitational pull of planets. That's it. It was a giant magnetic backpack that was like, well, gonna suck you off of that planet, bring you up into space, we're going somewhere else.
Yep.
And it's like, come on. Come on. Okay. Tangent is over. Let's move on to some more questions. Niels, first, Spidey Central also asked, do you have a favorite / least favorite combiner?
A combiner model?
Yeah.
But there's too many, for me to think over it quickly and just pick one.
That's fair.
I mean, I feel bad, but I might just have to go ahead and toss least favorite to Gardas.
That's wise. That's very wise. It's I would argue that is the only correct answer. Yeah, no, Gardas, from personal experience, is a near literal pile of trash. It is.
Yeah, I've built Gardas. I built him back in the day. It's something.
I built him recently at a friend's house, and holy Toledo, what a monstrosity! That is like I'm imagining like someone, like the Lego office was closing. It's like 10 minutes till closing, and someone's supervisor comes up and says, "Hey, Bionicle is ending. We need one more combination model for one more contest. Do you think you can make that like before the building closes?" The intern's sitting there going, "Yeah, boss, I'll handle it." And he just takes all of them and just smashes them together, because that's exactly how it builds. It's just you take all of the torsos, just it's like a giant plastic potato in your hands with a bunch of ball joints. It's just, I hate it. Ugh. Pit War Tortoise also kind of sucks, but that's another deal.
That's the thing is, I don't feel that qualified to speak on what my favorite is because I didn't build a lot of the combiner models.
Mm-hmm. That's reasonable.
Yeah, because back in the day, I would build the sets with the instructions, have them on my shelf for a while, and then after a while, I'd take them apart to make mocks with them. And there was really no point in there where I was like ready to take them apart, but didn't want to use their parts for something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get you. That being the case, then I will say, at least for me, my favorite combo model would be the Toa Kaida, the original Toa Kaida. Not because there's some spectacle of creation, it's just because I'm nostalgic for him. That's it.
I am as well. I kind of after they stopped doing them, I missed models that were actually combinations of those characters in story.
Hmm.
Fine with all the other combiner models that weren't and stuff, but it felt, at least when I was very young, when I was like 7 or 8 or whatever, it was like a goal almost, like it's like, oh, if I get these 3 Toa, then they can combine into the Toa Kaida, and it was like a big deal and it was cool. But oh, if you get these 3 Toa, they can turn into this thing that is what they used before the Vaki. It's
Mm-hmm.
like have a representation of that you can build, and that's cool, and I appreciate that now. But at the time, it was like, well, I don't want to do that because I like having the Toa.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want this non-character instead.
Mm-hmm.
Was my
Yeah.
mentality as a kid anyway.
Yeah. No, I get exactly where you're coming from with that. It's Like you want something a little more story relevant, a little more integral and centered around the characters you're smashing together. All right. Niels A. Anderson asks favorite slash least favorite year.
Um, Sorry, you're cutting in and out a little bit on my end. Was that favorite slash least favorite year?
Yes, it was.
Story or set wise? Does the asker specify?
No, they do not
Okay.
specify. I'll just say for because it's relevant. Let's go story.
Um, Story wise, it's so it's so hard to decide. But I did again. I was doing that series of Q&A stuff on Twitter recently and had to answer this then. So I'll go with the same answer I said then, which is I have a real fondness for the story of '08
Hmm.
because I guess just all of like I was mentioning earlier, as much as it's been a pain to me for putting together the compilation version, feeling of like all these different stories with all these different characters coming back, it felt big. It felt immersive and like a real finale was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I am one of the ones who people out there that I guess kind of wish the story had ended with '08, but I love the whole thing at the end with Pterodax's plan and everything. That was mind blowing to me as a child.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was substantial. No, that's a really good answer. '08 is a really excellent year. Niels adds, I'll add this onto the question. There's another one in between. However, this I feel as a tie-in. Also, your voice is too satisfying to listen to. Have you considered a career in documentaries narration?
Well, I really appreciate that. Um, I have on rare occasion had someone ask me before if I've considered doing like anything like voice related. I haven't really. Like I said, I don't like talking about stuff before I do it because I know it'll inevitably take me way longer to do it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I have tossed around the idea, not committing to anything, of doing, like I said, I want to do different formats of Biological Chronicle, like have an ebook version and stuff like that. I have tossed around the idea of a narrated version since people seem to like my voice.
Now, is this a narrated as is?
Basically, like an audiobook.
Yeah, but so it'd be you doing all the different voices.
Yeah, that's the thing. But I mean, in typical audiobooks, it's just one person reading it.
Yeah.
I would probably do slightly different intonation for different voices, but not necessarily like try to actually capture each person's voice as it should sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's only something I've tossed around as an idea. If people are interested in that, let me know. Because it would be a lot of work, and if people think they wouldn't really care, then that's that.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I think that would be a really good addition to things. I'll have some notes on your Liwa inflections, but we could discuss it later. No, okay. But that's fair. That I think that would actually be really good. Okay, now I'm gonna pronounce this as not it. So not it asks your views on Kapura's supernatural powers, which would be in relation to his teleportation in Monog.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I assume my views means like what do I think is the reason for that, or do I like I don't know.
Just kind of how do you feel about it? How do you look at it?
I love it. I love Kapura and everything about him. Personally, uh, it's one of those things where I feel like, especially as Bionicle went on and got into later years, where things got a little more of I feel uh, there was a big demand from the fan base for there to be an answer for everything. There needs to be an explanation for everything, why everything happens. And I sort of like to take a step back from that sometimes and just appreciate some odd can't necessarily be explained, as I like to think of it, like with Kapoor's thing. He trained and he can do that, and there doesn't necessarily need to be some deep lore behind it. It's just one of those fun little O1 oddities.
One of the O1isms.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think there are a few people. There are two different groups. There are the people that want a lot of mystery to be retained, and then there are the ones that want everything to be fleshed out, like what mask did every member of Totally Khan's team wear, or the Toahaga wear, or what weapons did they use, etc., etc. And then sometimes there's a few people right in the middle who are the have their cake and eat it too kinds, where they really want to see everything fleshed out, and then they get angry about it.
Yes, they'll ask Greg like, "What's this about?" And Greg answers, and they're like, "Well, don't say that."
Yeah, no, I didn't want you to say it that way. Yeah, yeah, I get that. All right, Diesel 20212 asks favorite Bionicle sets, G1 and or G2, and since you mentioned G1 earlier as being Lacan and or Butaka, do you have a favorite G2 set?
I think it'd be easier because they're fresher in my memory. But let's see, G2. In general, my favorite wave for sure was Winter 16. Um, Specifically, I remember, can't remember all of them in too much detail, unfortunately, but I had a fondness for Aka and Umarak.
Okay.
Umarak the hunter specifically,
Yeah.
not the destroyer.
I don't think I've heard anyone say, yeah, I liked Destroyer more than Hunter. Not yet. Good picks. Good picks. I like those. All right. Jet Indy asks, who is your favorite character?
Favorite character? It's hard. It's a hard question. So I always just go back to my sort of easy answer, which is Onua. I've always liked Onua the best of the first six Toa, I'd say, or the Toamata, I guess I should phrase that as. Onua is my guy. I like his quiet wisdom.
That's that's fair. Good answer. See, now what you need to do is you need to seek out Bionicle fan projects that need an Onua, and then you can voice Onua. And then I'll be Liwa in them. And then we'll be Onua and Liwa, and we'll be the best of pals. And when I get into trouble, you can bail me out. So I appreciate that in advance, man. Thank you.
I will mention, I guess, if anyone out there is looking for an Onua voice, I am always interested. I have not done so yet, but I have extended interest on Twitter before.
I definitely think you have the tonality. Like you definitely have the voice, like you have the gravel and the low speech that I would attribute to Onua. I definitely see that as a fit. All right. Alessandro asks, how do you feel about Barra Magna as a location for the story?
Uh, I I guess I'm curious from what angle they're wanting me to answer this. I am not one of the ones who thinks the story should never have gone to Barra Magna, if that's the question, because I know there are some people out there that think that the whole Barra Magna thing, it would have been better off if it didn't happen. Um, I don't know. I like Barra Magna fine. I think it was an interestingly different sort of setting for the story. It was a nice sort of twist. on what we'd been seeing so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree. Thought Bar Magna was cool. I liked a lot of the culture that was crafted for it. You know, the
Yeah,
gladiatorial arena, that system. I thought it was kind of neat.
yeah, it was neat.
Yeah.
I also still have a fondness for that first wave of Glatorian sets. It felt nice to just see so much color again.
Right? Like it felt like a return to form
Yeah,
after so many years, especially after the Zika and the
my
Fantoka
God.
with the overabundance of silver and gray to have
Yep.
characters whose weapons aren't exclusively silver. Oh
Oh
yeah.
my God.
That was really excellent. Okay, next question from Tesla Effect, who asks, "Have you ever eaten a mangosteen?"
No, I have not. I did not know what a mangosteen was or that it existed until, learning about LJ here and his affinity for them.
Well, I hope you're prepared for that to change in August because I am going to buy basically as many mangosteen as I can hold in my arms and just be handing them out. So,
Right.
as soon as I can, if you see me and I have mangosteen, walk up to me, you're going to have one.
Right.
So, guaranteed change.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome. I have a lot of people who can vouch for it. uh, okay. So, we have come to the near end. We're going to make these the last two questions. Uh, and this is a name which I've struggled with in the past and have not gotten a correction on. So I will do my best. Metzus asks, TuragaNuva, firstly, your favorite narrator from commercials or the movies. You have one.
Uh, that's an interesting question. Um, I think I would need to listen back to them. I don't find myself going back and watching the commercials a lot, so I can't. I have sort of a general impression in my head still of what one or two of them sounded like, but I can't really think of the distinctions between the different ones. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry if that's a disappointing answer.
No, that's fair. And I'm actually going to go back on that last question bit because that we like right after I said that we got like two other great questions and one comment that we will need to address. Um, so his second question was, if you had to choose between the two, O1 or O3. And I'm just gonna say, well, let's combine sets and story, just your overall feeling on them.
Oh. Mm, that's a tough one because O3 is like so much two completely different things, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's definitely more of a split.
Yeah, side note actually for those that have not checked out Biological Chronicle and don't know, while the volumes are almost entirely grouped by year, I put the entire Borak Call arc in book 2.
Really?
2002 story. Yeah, because I think it just rounds it out better there. It feels like a better fit to sort of because if you don't do that, then volume 3 with the O3 story is Borak Call, Tales of the Masks, and Mask of Light, which is like three completely separate sort of stories.
Mm-hmm.
He's pushing the call into the volume with the Borak is like, okay, there's sort of a thematic consistency here.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that.
But anyways, back to the question. Um, I guess I'd go. Man, let's go 01.
All right, good. I'm gonna
That's
put the gun
very
down
that.
now.
It's very close for me because I actually like the Borak Call arc more than I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people see it as sort of filler or whatever, but I have a fondness for it.
Yeah, I have a natural bias toward the call. I'm not gonna lie. Only because Galak Call was my first Bionicle set, so it's like,
Oh, gotcha.
I have to like him. Yeah, I'm of two minds about the filler call. All right, so we have a few really good questions here. First of all, from Stevie Brinson, who asks, "Can we get a live sampling of that potential Onua voice?" And I've got some quotes if you're down to clown, but if not, we can skip the next.
I think I need to do this one. Hey Stevie, how you doing? Glad to know you're listening. This is a personal friend of mine who is tuned in for the stream. It would seem. Sure. Give me a line.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and post it in Discord because we obviously spoke. I mean, I'm sure you're at least somewhat tangentially familiar with my isms in the community. Since we broached it earlier, I figure this quote is only appropriate. So just imagine right now I'm sitting here writhing in pain as I have the equivalent to a tailless face hugger stuck to my face. I need you to help me, man. I need you. You gotta help me.
Ratoa, of the name.
All right, so do that one more time. It kind of cut out just a little bit.
All right. You are a Toa. Prove yourself worthy of the name. That's what I got.
All right, fair enough. There you go. All right. So the next thing we do have to address this. Brother W, who doesn't have a question but has a comment. Self-mocks are just personas but biomechanical. It has been addressed. I am banning you. No. We are going to move on, though. Jet Indy, this will be the last one. And I mean it this time, darn it. Jet Indy asks, if you don't mind me asking another question, I do not, is there any early material, either from concepts before 2001 or things that were later decanonized, that you would have preferred stayed in?
To think of an example offhand, there's certain things that were said to be decanonized, but then got brought back in from Monog in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know if I can think of anything offhand really, because the thing is, I sort of touched on this earlier. As much as I would love to know everything, original story Bible and everything, I just want to know what all of the original ideas and plans were before they ended up changing for different reasons. Is what it is, and you can't. You can't change certain elements from that early on and still have the rest of the story sort of be what it was. You know what I mean? It all changed because of things that were removed or didn't go the way they were going to from early concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to say, oh, well, that thing should have stayed because that recontextualizes so much else, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. And that's fair. Admittedly, I can't think of anything that was like outright decanonized that I think would have improved the story greatly if it was re-included.
Oh wait, here we go. Love.
See, I was gonna address that. I was gonna. But now that you've said it, now you've gone there. We've reached the goalpost. I am also of the very controversial opinion that I think that the Bionicle story was absolutely fine without love. I think it had no place in the Matoran universe, and I think its inclusion on Bar Magna was perfectly reasonable. And I think that
So what do you
Bionicle was
think
fine.
about heavily implied feelings for no comma?
Sorry, what was that?
I'm curious what your thoughts are on, like, this is something that's always sort of bothered me, I guess, is that because I believe this was after Love was officially stated to be non-canon, that there's so much stuff in '04 and '05 where Matau is like clearly into no comma.
Yeah, yeah. So this is one of those really fascinating instances that I need context for. So when it came to the films as they are were all written by different people. So Greg was more in an advisory role in that instance. And I mean, obviously, a lot of people attribute the decanonization of Love to Greg. I have nothing to substantiate that. I don't know. We know from Alistair Swinnerton that it was never a part of the original story Bible, but that doesn't necessarily rule out its potential inclusion. Of course.
Hmm.
Um. So when it comes to instances of love in canon outside of Bar Magna, so Matoran Universe inhabitants, every single instance, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be, every single instance is included by someone outside of the direct story team. In Monog, it's Templar Studios, and none of Monog was passed through story, which is why a lot of it falls under the semi-canon category. The Borak animations, notably the Maku and the Huki scene, and toward the end you have Jala and Hali, also Templar. Also kind of a weird semi-canon relationship there. '03, Mask of Light, written by, let me find out who wrote Mask of Light. Flip. What just happened here? Alright, well, Firefox, do not do this to me. There you go.
Yeah,
Mm.
I get what you're getting at anyway. I
Okay,
see your
fair
point.
enough.
It's the films and Monog and the animations
It's all the
and stuff.
films.
Also,
It's all outside
tonally,
factors.
basically.
Exactly. And when it comes to novelizations, I do not know whether or not Greg was really able to change that, which makes their inclusion suspect. But that's basically it. So I see it as kind of a, well, I don't have enough context to really dispute it. At the same time, it started as an outside source.
That's fair. I'm curious what you think about Greg stating that the MU inhabitants could potentially learn to love on Barra Magna.
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
I think because, I mean, they're AI, they're artificial intelligence. The only reason they don't from a story perspective is because it's not an essential part, because we're talking about romantic love, of course. There's still brotherly, sisterly, familial love, which I think plays a perfectly reasonable role. I think it's perfectly acceptable to consider the possibility that they could learn, like Greg said. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'm just of the opinion that, as it stands, from the perspective of how the story went, it didn't need love, the romantic love. I think it was fine without it. I think it made sense it did not exist. But I think Greg saying that it's a possibility is perfectly reasonable. Well, how do you feel about it? Do you believe that's...
Oh, I think it's fine. Yeah, I certainly agree that it makes sense that they could learn that on like Spherus Magna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that would be their first full-on interaction with it, and we obviously know it's a thing. A lot of people that I've heard speak pretty highly of Samad's tale, not only because it got finished, haha, but because they really liked Samad actually getting fleshed out as a character and having that motivation with his presumably former wife slash fiance.
Hmm.
Okay, that basically takes care of everything. That's all the questions. Is there anything else you would like to say to anyone listening, anyone in the community, anything you'd like to impart, or any message that you would like to leave things off at?
I don't think there's anything in particular. I'll mention again, I guess, for those that maybe weren't tuned into the stream at the time I said it earlier, that I'm currently looking for any feedback or suggestions on the titles of the different volumes of Biological Chronicle, and I'll be holding polls later, probably across Twitter and BZP and TTV, maybe elsewhere, to figure out which titles should be the final ones. So if you have any ideas, any suggestions, they don't have to be one word. I know all the current ones are, but if you have something you think is really good, send it to me on Twitter or TTV boards or wherever.
Okay, all right, outstanding. I mean, I have some suggestions. You can name book 1, Liwa appears. Book 2, Liwa's first stumble. Book 3, Liwa's worst voice. Book 4, the worst year. Liwa doesn't show up at all. Book 5, the sequel to the worst year, etc. Anyway, I'm done on that tangent.
Did you call book 2 his first stumble?
Okay, that's reasonable. Fair enough. His most public stumble. The first citation for public intoxication is how I will angle that a little more. Oh man. All right, well, TuragaNuva, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a blast, and thank you for, well, I mean, of course, thank you, and to BIONICLE for creating this wonderful community resource. I think that the more we have of these, the easier it's going to get to show to people and to bring new individuals into the fold and in the community. So thank you for opening that door for a lot of people.
I'm glad that people really seem to like it. Thanks for having me on the show. This has been fun.
Absolutely, and if there are any updates, any more calls that you need, then you're always welcome back on. This definitely a fun time, and I think there's a lot more we can discuss about the Bionicle story. We could probably talk for many hours.
All right.
All right, and in that case, thank you to everyone who has been listening, be it live or the recorded version that will be up on the channel. Before I forget, TuragaNuva, is there anywhere on social media you would like people to follow you at?
So my handle everywhere I am is just TuragaNuva. I'm on Twitter primarily. I also have an Instagram where I post mocks when I feel like dealing with Instagram's UI. And I also have a Flickr page where I post all my mocks and stuff as well. Yeah, that's basically it.
And all of these are TuragaNuva? My apologies, what was that?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, excellent. Okay, in that case, all of those will be linked in the description below, and I, of course, highly recommend you check them all out. All right, that's going to do it. Again, thank you all so very much for listening. Again, check the description, and that will do it for this week. This has been yet another episode of the Eljay Johnsen Show. The show airs every single weekend, every Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, unless specified otherwise, over on Twitter, at the Eljay Johnsen, where you can find updates and guest announcements every single Tuesday. And if you have any questions over the week, make sure you head on over to my email, eljayjohnsen@gmail.com, where you can ask me anything, and I will get to it as quickly as possible, or ask the guest on the show. Remember, that's Johnsen. All right, that's going to do it. Once again, thank you all so very much, and we will see you all again another time. Have a wonderful week.